Thank you, Mr. Kolkowicz. Is there any questions from the floor? 有人要提问吗？ OK。那你讲。
我想请问一个问题，就是各个准则都经常的在修，可是很多的公共工程可能要2年、3年、5年。 那他一开始招标的时候，准则已经定了，可能工程只进行了2年，你又换准则，那这时候该怎么办？谢谢。
Hello, Mr. Kolkowicz. The question is that there are standards for these policies, and these standards change all the time. And while a construction may take 3-5 years. So if the construction is still undergoing, how do you deal with the problem? Thank you.
I didn't understand the question. It was about construction standards.
Yeah, because there are standards for certain construction procedures, right? And what if when the construction is still going and the standards have already been modified? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
I'm not a construction expert, to say that first of all, but we do have a lot of legislation in place in Europe which has to be implemented by the member states. For example, the excuse me, the environmental performance of buildings directive, so which is aiming to have in 2019 near zero energy buildings throughout the EU, which are defined according to the member states. So some member states will be more ambitious than others. So, but at least I think the policy should be previsible for a building company, that it knows that by the time it's finishing its construction, that which standards they have to meet, because there is a long-term planning for construction, and I think this is taken into account by legislation usually, but there might be small changes in the meantime, but I really don't know too much about it. I'm afraid that I didn't really answer your questions.
Because our audience member, she doesn't want to specify construction. She's saying that basically like all these green policies. So she was just taking construction as an example. But what if all these green policies, when you know these procedures are still undergoing, and then somehow the standards were modified, and how would you deal with that kind of situation? Yeah.
I mean, for green public procurement, when we are developing criteria, we are taking into account the latest developments. So we, of course, have to take an EU approach. So we want to give guidance to public authorities as well in Romania, Bulgaria, who are the latest EU members, as with more developed countries as well. So we try to make sure that our guidance are not outdated. For example, if we have new eco-design requirements which are taking off the worst products on the market, it's clear that green procurement guidance will be more ambitious than this, and we always have to keep up to date with the latest legislation, because if not, we might be recommending something for public authorities which is not ambitious enough anymore and might even not be legal anymore, because legislation has moved on in this field. But these are cases when we have to update green public procurement criteria when there's new legislation coming in, and that makes the process also quite challenging, because for a lot of product groups, every 2 or 3 years there are new requirements in this field, so the whole process has to restart again.
Anyone else?
我可以回应刚才那位小友所提的问题，再请教一下，就说因为以前在环保方面的时候的标准，在台湾是逐年的、慢慢的，从80年开始，84年慢慢提升的标准，表示更严格。那刚才所讲说是，但是我们这生产了以后，为了符合这个欧盟的标准的时候，送过去的东西可能因为他又把标准提高了，这个时候他们，我想刚才小姐请教的问题，大概是这种，在这个差异性的时候，他们是接受还是不接受？也就是说，假设我们现在是2014年，他所定光，那我们工厂所制造是2014年才做的，但是呢，当2013年的时候，它规范变了，我要进去的时候，他不一定会接受。这种情况呢，不晓得他是不是在欧盟怎么处理这事情？我这样讲，不晓得可不可以请他解释一下。
I think what he meant is that basically when Taiwan tries to export certain products to Europe, and the situation might be that when these products arrive in Europe, the standards have already been changed. So he's saying that is it in any chance acceptable in Europe that these products can still be imported, or are would they be just banned from importing?
Yeah, I think this is a question that my colleagues from DG Markt would be better positioned to answer on the international trade question as well. But green public procurement is not regulating the market in the way that it's excluding any products from the market. So you can still enter the EU market. Green public procurement does not have any impact on this. But of course, with the guidance that we're giving, which is, as I said before, mainly on a voluntary basis, we want to allow public authorities to buy the best products on the market. And so these can be products from Taiwan, and these can be European products. They can be from everywhere. But of course, we want to have a certain level of ambition in these products in order to reduce the impact of public purchasing on the environment.
Okay, thank you. I can add to that, to Robert's. Basically, I can just confirm what he said. I mean, the rules on green procurement that we've presented today and Robert presented today are basically voluntary rules. There are a few mandatory requirements, but as the way how does one go around green procurement at this moment is voluntary. We respond to this to the societal wish that we want to be green, and as we explained, we want to procure products that have lesser environmental impact and that are also fairly high tech, because as we explained, this is what Europe wants to export, and also this is what Europe will want to import. We want quality high tech products. Now there would be some standards that can be linked to green technologies, like, I don't know, emissions or so these criteria then obviously are mandatory. But in each legislation that the EU does, you will have a certain predictability. It's unlikely that we would change legislation from day to another. So the case that you would, prepare something, wrap it in a box, ship it to Europe, but by the time it arrives, there is a different standard. This is very unlikely. Even the directives, which I was explaining today, the overhaul, by the time it gets approved by the legislator, we give 2 years transposition deadlines to the member states to actually, adhere to that directive. So you see, you will always have certain predictability to enter the EU market.
请说。
我再请教一个问题哈，就是现在我想世界各国很重视这个绿色采购这个产品了哈，但是有没有想到从那个源头控管，你要生产这些绿色采购产品，啊，那源头它那个工厂那个管制啊， 排放那些有毒的那些管制方面啊，这个欧盟总署啊，不知道有没有一套严格的管制标准啊？从源头来管制的话，效果可能比这个单单那个鼓励买绿色采购产品啊，是不是比较好？另外谈到就是那个公共工程哈，你要减少那个碳排放量。现在譬如说你拆一栋的大楼啊，用整个爆炸一爆下去，那些灰尘啊，或者说我们的一大片的很多那个旧建筑啦，更新啦，全部拆除。那这一爆炸之下呢，你这个产生的这些碳啊，这个实在影响太大，是不是？我想这方面呢，是不是有没有一个，比如收存那个集成器这个要预备一个集成器你要爆炸之前，是不是周边要有一个集成器来把它收起来？所以这方面呢，我向这个欧盟这个执行委员请教，谢谢。欧洲总署的这个环保执行委员吗？就是这一位先生。
Okay, I think there are two questions. The first one is that he suggests that since the whole world is after green, then is there any policy adopted by the EU that you guys just start from the source? You guys control, for example, factories that instead of setting standards for green procurement, you start from controlling the source and maybe you try to minimize the pollution from the source. That's the first question. The second one is more specific. He mentioned that when you demolish an old building, there are a lot of dusts and therefore a lot of carbon. So is there any technology developed by the European Union that you can use to sort of mitigate the negative impact? Thank you.
These are rather wide-ranging questions, which goes a bit beyond my expertise, I'm afraid. So for the second question, I can quite easily say that I know nothing about these technologies, but I'm pretty sure that in the building sector that there are some technologies in how to demolish buildings in a way that you can afterwards try to separate a little bit the waste streams, and so that you can make a separation which materials goes into which waste stream, what can be reused later on. Do you have to landfill it? We're moving very much away from landfilling in Europe. Can you recycle it? Can you reuse it? Or what do you have to do it? Maybe it can also be hazardous waste and has to be disposed of in a specific way. But if you maybe send me the question via email, I would be happy to forward it on to somebody who knows more about construction processes. And the question on controlling factories and minimizing pollution at the source, this is in principle one of the most important EU policies, saying it is normally much cheaper to control pollution at its source than to have end-of-pipe solutions, as we call it, later on. So in Europe we have some emission standards for certain pollutants for companies who have to follow certain requirements. These are normally not things which we are addressing in green public procurement. In green public procurement we are mainly looking at the product, how it has been produced, but we also have to see how far this can be verified. And it might be rather easy for a public authority to say, okay, has this been produced according to the EU rules by a company which is placed in Europe, but it will be getting much more complicated if the product is coming outside of Europe. And for reasons of equal treatment, this is something very tricky to tackle within public procurement.
All right, thank you for your sharing, Mr. Karkowicz. Now I would like to move to the last presentation of today, Green Procurement in Sweden. That is have Mr. Peter Norstad, Director of Green Public Procurement, Swedish Environmental Management Council. That is welcome, Mr. Norstad.
Well, ni hao, everybody. Good afternoon. From a snowy Stockholm, Sweden. Right now we have -5 degrees and a lot of snow. It's quite different from Taipei, what I can understand. I was visiting your beautiful country 2 months ago, and we had maybe 30, 34 degrees every day. It was beautiful. I hope you always also have had a good day and been presented the European context on green public procurement, GPP. I will give you a brief background of green public procurement in Sweden, but also how we have been developing a tool for green public procurement the last 10 years, and also the experiences we had from working on green public procurement for more than 10 years. Slide number 2, describing the organization I work for. It's called the Swedish Environmental Management Council. We're actually a company. We're not an authority, but we are owned by the Swedish government and also the Swedish Regions and Municipalities Association. So we are a non-profit company. We have 3 main functions. We are the competent body for EMAS, and EMAS is the Eco Management and Audit Scheme. That's a similar environmental management scheme as ISO 14001, like you might know of that. We are also a competent body for the EPD, International EPD system. That's the Environmental Product Declaration system. That is a system that is working according to ISO 14025. And then we have the function as an expert organization for green or sustainable public procurement in Sweden. So we have the appointment from the Swedish government to help local authorities, regions, and state agencies to buy green and sustainable products, services. Next slide. As Robert said, in the EU, GPP is a voluntary approach, and it's the same in Sweden. We have voluntary criteria that you can actually use in public procurement, and we accept the mandatory requirements from the EU regarding energy efficiency and buildings as well, and energy products. In Sweden we had targets to increase the amount of green public procurement in the National Action Plan that was set in 2007. And we also have a target on setting well-defined requirements, and that is because before, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, there was a lot of vague criteria in public procurement regarding green performance, and therefore the government set this targets. In Sweden, the volume of public procurement is approximately 50 to 60 billion euros per year. What is not voluntary is the legislation on green cars that is bought or leased by governmental agencies. It came 2006, and in the beginning it said something 70% of all bought cars by the government must be green, and today it's 100% in the legislation. So that's the only Swedish mandatory requirement we have on green public procurement. And this definition on green cars is set by a Swedish authority, the Road Association. Next slide. The Semco tool, or the tool we have in Sweden, is an internet-based tool where we have approximately 74 different criteria documents split into different goods, services and work contracts commonly bought by the public sector in Sweden. We have set our criteria in 3 different levels. That is the basic level and the advanced level, but also a spearhead level, where we try to find the most environmentally adapted product that there is on the market. So we have both environmental criteria, but we also have life cycle costing calculation criteria and tools whenever relevant. And it is relevant, especially where you have energy consuming products. We also have social criteria when relevant, and that is often to state the ILO core conventions when procuring products. We write a lot of guidelines and motives documents that is aimed for procurers in Sweden in order to motivate them to why to use these criteria and to explain for the market why it is important with energy efficiency and other issues on sustainable or environmental procurement. We also have developed interactive web education tools and web training tools, and we do a lot of training in Sweden. We have a road show going on every year where we visit 10 different places around in Sweden. We have one-day seminars with where we invite politicians, procurers, and suppliers as well. And everything that we produce is put on our web page, that is www.msr.se, and then you can find all the English material on the English page, where we translate all our criteria documents into English. But we also have quite a lot of material in English as well. So please visit our homepage. Next slide. What kind of advantage can you see from a consolidated national approach on green or sustainable public procurement? Well, what we saw 10 years ago, that is that organizations have very limited resources to develop and to keep criteria updated, because in Sweden we have 290 local authorities, we have 21 regions, and we have more than 400 state agencies. So if all these organizations are going to develop their own tools, there will be a lot of waste of time and money. So we thought it's better to do it in one place with one expert organization instead. We also saw that there is a big need for a scientific and technical and legal approach through broad stakeholder involvement and consultations, and that will gain acceptance by the market as well if we try to involve the market in our criteria development. We also saw that there was a big need for harmonization of criteria, because the market was quite confused by all the different and various criteria specifications that were on the market 10 years ago in Sweden. So therefore we saw it very important to bring all these criteria or ambitions together in one national tool instead. And of course, if you have many users using the same criteria, the impact on the market will be great, of course. Next slide. So how well are we doing in Sweden? Well, we had a qualitative study in 2010 where they looked